I bought this MacBook Pro from Facebook Marketplace for $100, or around $65 US. All I know is that it apparently doesn't turn on, and the seller has no idea why. I took the gamble on this laptop as even in a not working condition, I believe I could still sell its individual parts for more than what I paid for the whole laptop. That is, if we can't get it working. The laptop is in perfect condition, no major scratches, no dents, no signs of neglect. A laptop in perfect cosmetic condition that doesn't switch on immediately has me thinking it's liquid damaged, or at least has something wrong with the logic board. But when plugged in, it does correctly draw 20 volts, with the amp reading gradually increasing to about 2 amps. I press the power button and nothing appears to happen. No chime, no light from the screen or touch bar. So I attempted an SMC reset, which by looking at the current readout, the laptop is definitely responding. But nothing's changed. But after some further investigation, I noticed the trackpad was clicking. So I attached an external monitor, closing the display immediately after pressing the power button to force the laptop to use an external display on boot. Sure enough, I was able to get to the boot menu, but when I pressed Command R to enter recovery mode, the display turned black. Something wasn't right. So I attempted to install a new OS from an external hard drive. But just like before, after selecting the boot volume, the display turns black and the hard drive goes to sleep. So the display is obviously dead, and its presence might be the reason we can't get anything to boot on the external monitor. But a new display is costly, and for some laptops like this one, it can be more expensive than purchasing another used laptop, which makes repair uneconomical. So instead of replacing it, we're just going to remove it, creating a displayless MacBook Pro. This will always force the output of the display to an external monitor, but will still allow us to use the built-in keyboard and trackpad. Inside, the laptop is very clean, with little dust and no signs of liquid damage. Although judging by the paint missing from some of the screws and the fingerprints, someone has had a look inside this laptop before us. But you might be asking yourself, if this laptop has no damage, why doesn't its screen work? Well, looking up the serial number, we can see this is a 2016 model, the year Apple changed to their present display cable design. Early models had a fatal flaw where the cables would be chewed up over time under normal use from opening and closing the display. The cable length was increased in 2018 to prevent this issue, and Apple did launch a free replacement program for the smaller 33cm model, but never offered a free repair for the same flaw found in the larger MacBook Pro. This program covers MacBooks for 5 years after the purchase date. But this MacBook Pro was purchased 5 years and 3 months ago, so this isn't an option. Back inside the MacBook, I'll begin by disconnecting the battery before we proceed in removing the display. There is one main cable connecting it to the logic board. Once detached, the display's control board can be unfastened. Underneath is 2 triangle-shaped rubber pieces that protect the cables when the display is open. Before we can access the hinge screws, the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna must come out. There's quite a lot of pentalobe screws holding it in place. Once the hinge covers are out of place, the antenna can be worked free, carefully routing its cable out from under the heatsink. Finally, the 6 Torx screws holding the display in place can be unfastened before the display is lifted out of place. Inspecting the display's flex cables, I can see some stress marks on 3 out of the 4 cables. This is likely all it's taken to kill this display. These cables are soldered directly into the screen, so can't be replaced like the older models could. And they measure in at just 0.11mm thickness. But with the display removed, it's time to test this displayless MacBook Pro. After attaching all the cables and powering up the device, we find it is still stuck at an Apple logo. So I'm going to try and reinstall the OS again. And you wouldn't believe it, it won't boot. So it's back on with the display. While I don't have a functional one, I do have a cracked screen from a 2017 MacBook Pro. Let's see if that allows us to diagnose the issue. We can now see an image on the inbuilt display, but of course with a broken screen I can't tell what's going on. But I can tell you it's booted into something, as the touch bar has lit up with an escape key. So I'll bring the MacBook back over to my desk and attach the external display. This time everything should work, right? And you wouldn't believe it, it's not booting again. It's frozen at an Apple logo. I rebooted the laptop without the external display attached, and again the touch bar lit up with an escape key. It seems attaching the monitor stops the device from booting. Attaching the monitor after it's already booted, we finally get to see an interface. It was already trying to boot into recovery. From here I could wipe the laptop. What I thought would also reinstall the OS didn't, and left us with just a blinking question mark. As this laptop flat out refuses to boot from any recovery mode with an external display, I had to get creative. I loaded into the boot menu with an external monitor, but the second I selected the boot volume, I unplugged the monitor, only reattaching it after it booted up. Sure enough, that worked. But now I have a new problem. The ports on the laptop are too close together, so I couldn't attach more than one USB-A dongle, meaning I couldn't attach the keyboard and mouse. And unplugging the power cable to get an extra port causes the laptop to enter sleep as the lid is closed. With no way to attach the keyboard and mouse, I'd hit a roadblock. That was until I discovered the 2-second delay it takes to switch between the external and internal display. During this short period, the trackpad was active, so by repetitively opening and closing the screen, I was able to slowly move the mouse around and click on the necessary options to install a new OS. Seriously, why are attached displays programmed to extend and not mirror in recovery mode? This was probably just something overlooked, but it makes working with a broken Mac almost impossible. With the new OS installed, we can see our laptop is up and running. So it's time to remove our broken display and make this back into a headless MacBook Pro. If you're wondering how Apple recovers data from a broken MacBook, they use this little connector and attach a special dongle. If you could find one, it's probably an easier way to install the OS if you face some issues, like I did. To prevent the display connector shorting against the housing, I'll wrap it in some polyamide tape. While there's no display being reinstalled, I'll still put all the old screws back, as if I was ever to find a cheap screen, I'd be able to reattach it. If you're doing this yourself, be sure to only tighten the screws until you feel resistance. They won't tighten all the way now that the screen is missing. There are of course some pieces that won't be able to go back in as they rely on the display being present, like these hinge covers, or this display bracket. So you'll need to keep those handy if you ever plan to reattach a screen. With the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna reattached, it's time for the battery to be plugged back in before we close up this modified MacBook Pro. With the internals cleaned, the back panel can be slid and clipped into place before the 6 pentalobe screws are fastened. And we're done. So this is it, a displayless MacBook Pro. With an OS finally installed, we can see the modified laptop in action. While we had great difficulty getting recovery mode booted, once an OS is installed, it boots using an external monitor without issue. It's similar to a desktop Mac, like Mac Mini or Mac Studio, but it has a built-in keyboard, touch bar and trackpad, all this plus a battery backup. It's quite a good way to repurpose a broken laptop, especially since it costs nothing to do. If you're doing this to a MacBook, I wouldn't try and reset the OS. I'm not sure if this issue is just something to do with this model or all MacBooks, but I think the recovery mode needs a lot of improvement. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and check out the Modified Tech playlist for more videos just like this one. And if you're looking for any used devices, be sure to check out my online store, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.